brought to you by Sparkle Saloon. Professional, affordable, and quality services.
Miscarriage. There's several words that we use when we talk about a miscarriage. Sometimes we call it a miscarriage. The more technical term we use is abortion, although when we say abortion, it raises a lot of connotations with people because they start thinking of something I did. Other people talk about pregnancy loss, which is a more generic term that covers a wide scope of conditions that lead to a loss of a pregnancy before a full-term delivery. So miscarriage, in our terms, permit me to use the word abortion. So we talk about any pregnancy that ends before 28 weeks, which is in our Ugandan setting. Other settings would probably use kilograms, so anything below 1 kilogram would be considered an abortion. Anything below 500 grams in some countries, more developed countries, would be considered an abortion.
This particular episode is more of a personal story, and I invited our guest, Denis Kekimuri, who is the author of So What Next, this particular book. I invited her to the show to share her story with us, and I'll let her tell her story rather than preempting it. She came to the show with her daughter, Kayla Kishemeza Ngesa, who is 9 years old. Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
Did I say your name right?
Yes.
Both of them?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share this story. I know it can't be easy, but you put it in writing, so
yes, thank you
we
for
want to
having
talk about
us.
it. Yeah, all right. So let's say it as it is. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us once again. You wrote a book, Denise, So What Next? And it's a story of your miscarriage with your first son, James, and also your second baby. Tell me about that.
My third baby.
Your third baby.
Maybe the third.
Your first baby is Kayla, who is here. Second baby was James, and the third baby is Kate Angaza.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I had questions. That's why I wrote the book. That's basically what it was. I had so many questions and no one to answer them. So I wrote down what I was going through and what I experienced and what I found, revelations that just kept coming to me.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's start from the beginning. So this was 2017, the beginning of 2017.
Yeah.
What happened?
So 2017, Feb, I conceived, I had James. And we were excited, of course, because it was a new chapter. We got married in 2015. So 2016, so we were trying to just now begin our family. So sadly, about 7 weeks later, we're going to the doctors to check and get the first scan. So you find out whether everything is okay. But the doctor was not, I don't know how to tell this story, but at the scan, the sonographer was so distant and not forthcoming with information, like what's going on. So I kept asking and no one is telling you anything. And so when you're led into the doctor's office, of course, now you're waiting to be told what is happening. And before I could even sit, the doctor's like, this pregnancy is not viable. I don't know what that means. I'm just plain Quechua. I didn't know what viable means. So I was taking all this in and I was like, what does that mean? Is viable the same in pregnancy as it is in life? Then, yeah, so now she starts breaking down for me and she's like, oh, sadly, this is not, so now we have to do an evacuation. I was like, what is that? So you see all these big things coming at me. So, yeah. So we lost James at
7 weeks.
Yeah, 7 weeks.
And that was the beginning of 2017.
Yeah.
your husband was there at that point?
Yeah, my husband was around. We were all settled here in Uganda.
In Uganda.
So yeah, yeah. So that was the first miscarriage.
Okay. Then you waited a couple of months.
More like I timed everything.
What do you mean you timed everything?
Because I wanted a baby so badly. You know those, you're like, oh, I really need. So I had my ovulation calendar. I was like, this is it, okay. Yeah, this is our time now. This is our timeline. This is when it's highest. This is when I peed on ovulation sticks. It was mechanical. So about a month later, I conceived Ketangaza.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is about 7 years after Kayla.
Yeah.
Okay, that was quite a
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah, it was a long. I had Kayla when I was 25, and we hadn't yet gotten married. You can see that. So even trying to have a baby in that time was a bit hard because he's Kenyan, I'm Ugandan. We are there, he's here, I'm there. So this was now our time because we had, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you conceive Ketangaza.
Yeah.
How did that go? The
Well-
process up to December.
Well, so my doctor, because I changed doctors after that, and I was like, I need someone who's a bit more compassionate. So I go to him and he's like, okay, this is good news. Bad news is bed rest, full, like no moving, no doing anything, no. Now this is a bit hard because at that time I was a breadwinner for the family. So my husband had moved here, but there's that whole Ugandans fear Kenyans and Kenyans fear. So we've had that kind of marriage where it's hard to work in each other's countries. So we conceive and put on bed rest, and I'm now forced to go back home because I was like, okay, we can't maintain this.
Or you were in Kenya at this point?
No, we were here.
You were here?
Yeah, but then I was like, now rent what? I was like, no. So we go back home, and bed rest begins, and it was a long. My bed rest is low. You're doing nothing, and I'm not that kind of person. I can't sit still. I need action and movement. So what?
Why were you put on bed rest?
Because, so, 35 and above. I was about 40. I was about 33, 34, 34. It was just because of what had happened with James. He didn't want to take any chances. So he's like, okay, let me just put you on bed rest. You keep coming for checkups, you go for your antenatals, you know, just I was on super watch.
Okay.
Because he didn't want anything to go wrong again. And somehow, I don't know, I hadn't put 2 and 2 together. Like what happened to James, I didn't think this would happen. I was like, so when we passed second trimester, he's like, now you're in the clear, we're good to go. So Christmas morning, Kayla comes into the room, and you know how all kids are expecting their presents on Christmas. This one goes down to look at the Christmas tree, and she's like, there is no, I don't have a present. Santa didn't come. I'm looking, I'm like, what do you mean Santa didn't come? Santa came. I knew Santa came. I knew Santa came, so I told her, you go back and look. So she comes in, and she's been given a guitar. She was gifted a guitar, so she was playing for me. We were on the bed. She was on my bed. And when I stood up, she looked at me and she was like, Mommy, you're susuling on yourself. Now in my head I was like, this is where this pregnancy has reached. There's even no more self-respect. So now things are just coming out from anywhere. So I'm like, what is happening? So I go to the loo and I'm like, this is not pee. This is something different. And it was just gushing. So I was like, could it be my water broke? So I call my doctor, he doesn't pick up. I'm like, okay, I guess Christmas morning, everyone is going through this opening Christmas presents and stuff. So I call my cousin who had given birth 2 months before that. We share the same doctor. So when I call her, I'm like, you know what, something weird has happened. She's like, can you call Emma and go to the hospital now?
Emma is the doctor?
Emma is the doctor.
Okay.
This is not something to joke about. Now, I don't know, my head was not registered. Because I was like, I'm 8 months. We have 1 more month. I don't know what this is, but yeah. So Emma finally, I call him, he picks up. He's like, so I tell him what's happening, and he's like, So he's very calm. He's like, this building would be falling and he'd just be like, we're gonna be fine. So he's like, I just need you to get to the hospital and do a scan so we see what's happening. So that was my Christmas morning.
You were in the hospital for 6 days.
Yeah.
And you lost the baby.
Yeah.
Why do you feel, because I know that this has happened to a lot of mothers, you know, they lose their babies, but they don't really talk about it. It's a thing that they're allowed to pass, or they're told just be quiet about it and you'll have another one.
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to write about it, talk about it?
I think, like I said, I had questions, but more things were just shocking me. Because when I lost my child, all the women in that who came to see me were like, even me. I was like, huh? Hold up. And what was the advice? They said, no, you just get back on the horse, you get another one. And I was like, guys, this is some traumatic stuff. We're not going to just sweep it under the rug. So I started journaling because there's so much stuff that was happening at that point, and I think the only thing that kept me sane was writing. So I wrote out most of the things that are in the book. Others I just kept remembering when I was writing it out. Our mother's generation comes from a harsh generation. It's goma, stay there, be quiet. I was like, no, this is not what I'm going to pass on to my child. At least I need her to have some kind of reference book. That was why I wrote the book, because I went to look for an African setting. All the books that are out there are written by Western world people. They have meditation, they have grief counselors. I was like, no. What do we do? What do Africans do? What is who's writing our book? What's our story with this? And it stopped being even 1 in 4. Because I was looking around and I was like, okay, we are 6 in here. 5 of you have told me, so this might actually be another statistic that no one is taking. And I was like, no, someone has to open up and tell this story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where was Kayla in all of this? Kayla, where were you throughout all of this?
I was actually at home.
Did you know what was happening?
And then
You had no idea?
I'm just there watching cartoons.
At some point, I know you went to the hospital to see your mother, and she told you what had happened.
Tears came to my cheeks very fast.
Yeah. And what did you think after that? Because I remember she gave you music to listen to, an iPad, your iPad, and what were you thinking?
Why doesn't God want me to be a big sister?
What do you think now?
I think that the whole point why God did that was for my mom to write the book for other people.
Oh, wow. Did you know that, Denise?
No, I didn't. No. No.
Okay, so Kayla thinks you went through what you did so you could write the book for other women.
I've had that. I've actually had someone say that, and I was like, when they told me, I was so angry. I was like, how dare you say that? Actually, what they said was, there's no better person this could have happened to than you. And I said, what? I said, yeah. You're the one who's going to turn this out and make lemonade out of this. You're not going to sit down and wallow in it and get stuck at some phase. And I was like, no, I'm actually, it was a process to get to this point, to actually write. Because we're not even taught how to grieve, You're always told to just keep everything inside.
Guma.
Yeah, and that just is not right, And the more I kept writing, there were so many women who'd come and tell me, I was like, how are you functioning? Because I don't know, I don't think I can go back to work and start like nothing happened. It's like there's a huge chunk of you just went, and that's a sad thing, life does go on. So you have to find a way to deal with this by yourself. in your own, I was like, no, no, now let's start talking about it.
So there's a list of things that people normally tell you when you lose someone, and you also noted down some of those. One was be strong, and God has a plan, and all of that. It's also difficult, I think, for the other people who come to see you because they don't really know what to say. What would you rather, now that you think about it, at that particular moment, all these people flooding your hospital room, what would you rather they'd have done?
Who told us we have to say something when someone has lost?
You'd rather they were quiet?
I've never gotten that, because there's nothing you're going to say to make this an easier. I'm already in it, or we are already in it, we've experienced the loss. You don't have to say anything. You can just be. Your presence is so much, it takes over everything. Not showing up is actually something that I realized through this, that there are a couple of my friends who now are more like acquaintances now because they just didn't show up. And most of them, their thing is like, I don't know how to deal with Kecho now. I'm like, okay, it's fine. But then there are those who showed up and were just quiet through the whole thing. So you always have to wait for the other person to open up. But we don't know that. People come and they want to make you feel better. Why? I've lost someone or something that's very dear to me. Let me go through it. When I'm ready to talk, I will. At least I know who to turn to. Yeah.
You know who's there,
Yeah.
who wants to actually know
Yeah.
or hear you.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Salons. We offer professional barber, hairdressing at Lugogo Mall, Garden City, Forest Mall, Oasis Mall, and Acacia Mall. Sparkle Saloon. Professional, affordable, and quality services.
To you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center Nile Room, and tonight we're listening to a personal story from Denis Kekimuri, who is the author of So What Next, a book that details the loss of her 2 children. And she's also in the studio with her 9-year-old daughter, Kayla, who has been her strongest support, biggest support system throughout all of this. She's nodding, even with the tea when she was writing the books.
Yes.
What did you do exactly, Kayla?
Well, in that time, my mom was very sad, so usually I'd watch black and white movies with her, like every Saturday night. So even in the morning, I'd bring for her tea.
Anything to help her feel better?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was thinking about it when I was looking at her actually here on the stage with us, and I was thinking, do children who lose their siblings get to have some kind of counseling, someone talk to them throughout the process? Because I feel like you grow up with that on you. What was the process for her for recovery from all of it?
Well, the children, okay. I go to Worship Harvest, and they have a class where there's a leadership course. Everyone has to write a book. Now, there's a lady who wrote a book called No Makeup On. She's called Hope. Hope had a huge loss when she was a kid, and it literally changed her entire perspective, her whole outlook on life. And after we read that book, my sister and I were like, okay, these kids have seen you blow up. They are waiting. There is no child. We have to walk them through this. We had to actually bury her so that they have a place where they can see her, and they know that this one she died and this and this. Kids, most times, their parents they won't hold your hand, because even then themselves, they're going through a lot of many questions unanswered and all that. What happened for Kayla though was, she's very close with her cousin called Jethro. Like they sit and talk about everything and nothing and everything. So when she actually came to the hospital, her first question, after all this, was like, can I go to Jethro's home? And I was like, perfect, you have figured this out on your own. But she kept coming. Like I told her, I said, I even sat all of them down and I said, if any one of you is sad at any moment, has questions they don't come ask me. So one of her cousins came and asked, but why did God kill the baby? I said, I have no idea. When I get that question, when I get the answer, I will let you know. So up to now, he keeps looking at me like, have you got the why? And I'm like, I don't see it. Not yet.
The why is a very broad question. However, we've got something. If you go online, you can look up something we call the iceberg of pregnancy loss, which shows that about 70% of pregnancy losses occur before the clinical manifestation of a pregnancy, or rather before term. If we start with the earliest, which occurs in the first few days, those ones are usually attributed to implantation failures, which could be a result of something wrong with the inner lining of the uterus that prevents implantation from taking place. Could be failure of modulation of the immune system to incorporate the pregnancy. Could be infection. Could be structures within the uterine cavity like fibroids, or some cases an IUD. So those will all be responsible for that kind of pregnancy loss before implantation. Then you've got pregnancy loss that occurs after implantation. That could also be because of infection, and sometimes also genetic defects in the pregnancy that are not compatible with life. Could be caused by trauma. Could be caused by high temperatures, such as in fevers. Could be caused by toxins from the environment. And there's alcohol, drugs. When I talk about drugs, I'm talking both about recreational drugs, but also medication for one reason or another. There are some drugs that you cannot use when you're pregnant. And so every time you get pregnant and you go to see a doctor and you need medication, I always advise that check with your gynecologist whether this drug is safe for pregnancy, because some of them could lead to a miscarriage. Then there are medical conditions such as diabetes, blood group incompatibility. There are some women who have got, we usually talk about the ABO blood group system, but then there's another system called the rhesus system. Women who are rhesus negative and are exposed to positive blood at risk for miscarriage, abortion, pregnancy loss.
In the absence of, your husband wasn't there
Yeah.
throughout
No.
that period you were in the hospital for the 6 days.
Yeah.
And I could read in your book the moments when it made you angry.
Yeah. Because of our weird marriage, cross-border, because he couldn't find work here, he decided to go back home and find work, which he did. But during the Christmas break, when I got into hospital, he went through he got it faster than I did. Because when I called him and told him I am in hospital, he was like, not again. And I didn't know what he meant. So he went through he literally had a shutdown, because he was like, we can't do this. We cannot go through this again. So he wasn't there. He came at, I think 30th? He came on 30th. He came 30th. And when he showed up, you could see there was confusion written all over him, because he had no answers. There was nothing. He just showed up. I think he was literally just there.
Unfortunately, most times I have interacted with only the mother who's lost a baby. Most times. Then there's sometimes when the husband is present. But the thing I usually want to address is, especially for the first trimester pregnancy losses, where the cause may not be known, because we have not studied to determine if it's a genetic factor. Where is the genetic problem? Is it in the husband? Is it in the wife? We don't do those in this country. In those cases, my advice to them is usually not to assign blame. And that is usually my approach. That these things happen, and because we don't know what the cause is, we can't tell you with any direct conclusion that you are responsible. Because many people, when something like that happens, the first approach is, what did I do wrong? What didn't I do? And so it's to encourage them that, look, it's not your fault, it happened. And we talk them through it. And it makes them more accepting. So there's a lot of stigma surrounding that. I met a lady who lost 6, 7 pregnancies before she finally had a baby. I've met another who's had 10 pregnancy losses. And usually they suffer silently because once you mention it, the stigma that that attracts from society can be quite debilitating.
Do you think that men have a support system? I know women talk, you know, at least we find groups and we find our friends and, you know, but men, what do they do?
They don't talk.
Do you know how he's been coping?
They internalize, that's what they say. They say women were more outspoken, men go inside. But I feel that men, this is actually, you've also experienced a lot, so there should be an avenue for you to express this. We didn't even know this because we were grieving in our own separate ways. So when we went to see a counselor, he's like, have you guys grieved together? And we were all looking at him like, what? What does that mean? What does that even mean? What do you mean grieve together? It's like, well, you made a baby together, so you must grieve together. Now the grieving together it's a lot of unforgiveness, undoing, and letting it all out and setting it free. Like, this is not your fault, it's not my fault, it's not no one's fault. It has happened, it has happened. How do we move forward then?
Did you ever find out why you lost James? What happened exactly?
No, they never did. They called it a misabortion. That's what they called it.
Okay.
Yeah, I never found out what happened. They're just some, apparently miscarriages, the explanation for it is not concrete. It's not there. It just happens. The egg or some women, the cervix opens, miscarriage, that's it.
And for Kitangaza?
Kitangaza, she had a breathing problem, respiratory. Because the last thing to develop for most babies are the lungs. So that's what that last month is all about. But because she had come earlier, she couldn't cope with, it was too heavy, too much for her little lungs.
Okay,
yeah.
Right.
Yes, warning signs. The commonest warning sign we see is bleeding. So any woman who develops bleeding either early in the pregnancy or at later stages in the pregnancy should check that out, because that could be a warning sign for beginning of a pregnancy loss. Abdominal pain is another common finding. Later in the pregnancy, if the waters break before the pregnancy is at term, or that could also be a warning sign of an early pregnancy loss. Usually in the 20s, between 20 weeks and 28 weeks, if you get the water breaking at that point, it could lead to a pregnancy loss. And so if that happens, have it checked out. The other thing is loss of the signs or symptoms of pregnancy. Because you'd have a woman who's not bleeding, she's not having pain, but the nausea and vomiting that she had suddenly disappears. So when you have things like that, check it out. Loss of fetal movements of the baby in the womb. When the baby suddenly stops moving, check it out. It could be that the baby has passed away in the womb, and that should be examined.
I noticed in your book you mentioned it a couple of times about how having a baby later in life, and a part of me felt like, was she thinking maybe I had this baby too late? Was it one of the questions that you had?
I discovered that later. The age thing, I discovered it later. There's actually a word for it. You're high risk, actually. From 35 onwards, your pregnancy is high risk. So I didn't know that, but I knew that there was something wrong after she had died. I was like, there has to be some kind of explanation for this. Like, and all the women who were telling me were at a certain age. You understand? So you're looking 37 years, 40. You're like, is this something they didn't tell us? Are we going to just have to learn it ourselves? Are we going to have to just go with the flow? No, it's not something I'd want to tell Kayla, like, when these things happen, or no. So, like, I keep telling her, I'm like, by the time you're 24 and you're done with campus, bring the babies, I'll look after them. I don't want her to go through this. But she's literally, after all this, she was like, I'm scared to give birth, and mommy, I'm really scared because of what happened. So I keep telling her, have them early. Because I had Kayla. When I had Kayla, I bounced back like nothing.
We have found that women who are older than the age of 35 are more at risk of getting miscarriages, because the quality of the eggs by that time has reduced. The other thing we found is that obese women are more at risk of a pregnancy loss. So if you're obese, we usually advise that if you're planning to get pregnant, cut down some of that weight, because excess weight has been associated with pregnancy loss. Blood group has been mentioned because this blood group is something that you're going to be with for life. So that would be probably responsible for recurrent pregnancy loss. There's a condition we call antiphospholipid syndrome that has also been associated with pregnancy loss, recurrent pregnancy loss, and it can be treated. Oh, one of the things I didn't mention was what we call an incompetent cervix. So if you've got pregnancy loss, usually it starts about the second trimester and then happens again with subsequent pregnancies with reducing age of the pregnancy. That one, if identified, one of the preventive measures would be to put a stitch on the cervix to strengthen it so that it can carry the pregnancy to term. That would be an intervention that we would take. People who have got blood group rhesus negative, we advise them to get, there's a special injection that we advise them to get during the course of their pregnancy to reduce the risk of pregnancy loss. Also, people who are using drugs, alcohol, cut down on that or stop it altogether. If we're thinking about obesity as a possible cause, then cut down the weight. If you're thinking it's diabetes, treat the diabetes. It's an infection, identified early, treat it. Antenatal care is critical. We usually advise mothers that as soon as you recognize that you're pregnant, start your antenatal care. Because there are things that can be discovered at that point that can be treated or prevented from leading to a miscarriage.
But now it's a year on and I still have all sorts of complications and stuff.
I've had a lot of women who have had C-sections talk about the pain and the sharp pains or a stitch is popping about even 10 years later.
Yeah.
And many of us always think really you're not exaggerating things because it's 10 years later really. The stitch can't still be. There's a knot that they tie at the end. I don't know, these doctors need to find some other way to do this. And you can't lean on that side. So that side becomes sensitive. You can't do strenuous things like, I don't know, even exercise. And they don't tell you these things. You're not even supposed to drive for like 3-4 months. But guess what? 6 weeks you're going for your review, you enter the car and you drive. But that's strenuous. On our roads?
Yes, on our potholes. Yes, and you go.
You had a tubal ligation done as soon as Kitangazi was out because you felt, I'm done.
Yeah.
And now?
Now we have to harvest. We have to harvest eggs and sperms and have them planted into my uterus. Or God will work some kind of miracle and it will just happen. But yeah, it was a decision we just had because we're like 2 is enough, right? And my husband is like, okay. And that high risk was really, it just, you know, it gets you like, man, my life. And we're going through, I remember 2017, there was a period where there were so many mothers dying, giving birth. I was like, man, I'm good. 2 is enough. We will be fine. So yeah.
So to have a permanent family planning method, is it a thing you would tell your friend to have now?
No. After what I went through, no. But then again, when they start telling you you're high risk, yeah, yes and no, depending on how many do you have, how many do you want, what hospital are you going to? That's another key thing. Yeah.
Who is your doctor?
Who's your doctor? That's another one. You know, so most people who actually are going, most ladies who I meet and are trying again, I always tell them go to doctor. Because what they've experienced with the other guy is even traumatizing. I don't know how, most people don't go back to that doctor who dealt with them when they had the loss. They don't even go back to the hospital. Like, I remember I had to go for a review and I stood in the parking of that hospital until my husband is like, you have to enter. Huh? You know, we've come here for a review. They can't review you from the parking. You have to enter. And it's traumatizing.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take another short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. We are coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center Room, and like I said before, tonight we are talking to Denis Kekimuri, who is speaking about her book, So What Next, and her daughter Kayla Kishemeza Ngesa is in the studio with us. Kayla, you wanted to tell me about what happened after the hospital visit.
So I went to my cousin Jethro's. So when I reached there, I told him about it, and I asked him the question, why doesn't God want me to be a big sister? So he said that God has a plan for you. So after that, we kind of just played on the tablet. Their uncle came to visit. I do not know if he could talk or not, because he was silent.
Do you think about Kaitangaza now?
Yeah.
What do you think when you think about her?
She's in a better place.
Okay. So your book right now, Denise, is in bookshops right now, and also at Worship Harvest Ministries locations.
Yeah.
Okay. Has your husband read it?
Yes.
What did he say?
Well, at first he wasn't so forthcoming. I don't think he wanted me to share our story, but I think he had a conversation with his dad or his mom, and they told him that his mom had lost a child before him. He's like, oh yeah, Kecho, this feels like betrayal. They didn't tell me. And I was like, you see that? That's why we need to have this conversation. We need to get this book out and let people start talking. There are old women who can't read my book. I have an auntie who stopped on chapter 1. She's like, Kecho, you have opened can of worms, things I had buried and I didn't want to deal with it. I was like, okay, you're 70 years. How far back was it? She's like, yeah, but you see, us, we didn't have that time in between bullets flying and just trying to keep yourself alive. I was like, yeah, then after, I said, then after you move on with your life, you don't sit and write a book. I was like, why didn't you write a book? And it was just how they were raised.
Or talk about it,
Yeah.
actually.
Just have an open, I don't know, we don't even have those tools. Like I kept asking, how many grief counselors do we have in Uganda? Are there any in any offices? Because there are women who are losing these babies, are sitting in those offices. There's your teller, there's your who, and they have to do everyday life, but no one is sitting there saying, Mkwano, come, sit down, let's talk about this.
I think one of the things that I've heard before from someone I know who lost their baby, who had a miscarriage, was it became very hard for them to conceive later in life. Because I think they weren't cleaned up well enough. Also, it was because they didn't want to go back to the hospital for a review. They just didn't want to deal with it again.
Yeah.
So later in life, they're having problems until they found out, oh, it was because you didn't go back and
Get a review. There's something my doctor told us when we had a book launch, and we had a session, a round table session with different people, and he said, women, we're born with all the eggs we'll ever need in our lives. When you're born with all your eggs. There's no other manufacturing plant out there. Not like men who make their sperms every 72 days. So when you grow past a certain age, there are few, and if they're there, they're not that fertile. So they have to pump you with extra drugs to get as many as you can possibly. And of course, you've seen the price of IVF in this country. It's like, so it becomes harder. We just need to have this conversation. It becomes harder. And doctors, they'll tell you, go see a doctor and he'll help you. But their knowledge stops at a certain point. There's only so much they can do to help you. Now, had I known that after this one, I could have just had Doremi first one, ended that story, I would have done it. I would have. Not to wait until 35 to actually find your high risk.
And it seems to be a thing that many women are doing now, to wait until they have their career in order, the rest of their life in order. Then they can have children, because they want to have children they can take care of.
Yeah. It's a catch-22, and I don't know why we have been put in this box. I don't know whether this was God's original plan, but at 24, what's happening? Okay, so the peak age to have babies is 24, where you're not going to have, but at 24 you're barely supporting yourself. You're just trying to get a career and all that. This is how society has done us wrong. So now you will work off, let's say, 8 years until you get enough money, find that guy, that's another whole topic altogether. So 32, you have a bit of money, you have the guy, you get married, then you start the process. It doesn't get any easier. So you've given away the most productive years. The thing about this is, when you talk about it, you're healing. You know, there are women who will not say anything, they'll internalize it, but that's not how we were meant to function generally. But it hinders everything around you. You start becoming angry, you're having bouts, you're crying out in toilets somewhere in your office, and people are not understanding but they know that it happened, but then they're like, she should move on. But she can't move on because she can't even tell her own story. So can we get a platform where we can open up about this? It's just...
You have this WhatsApp group that's been very useful for you.
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you was how your family has handled all of this throughout this period. You seem to have a very close-knit group around you.
Yeah. What I didn't know about this is that everyone else around you suffers. It's because you're in it by yourself. You feel you're in it by yourself, you're in the mark. You don't know that there are other people who it has affected: your sister, your brother-in-law, your children, your husband. My dad couldn't look at me for a while. He couldn't look at me in the eyes. He would look everywhere else but at me. He told my matron, he said, in Richiga, he said, you have a lot of work to do. And my matron was like, and you're the father. I said, because even they don't know how to, he doesn't know. He was just looking at my husband the whole time. And I don't know how you're going to deal with this situation. He didn't know. And yet my mother went through it 3 times. So I always ask, there's a time we had a conversation, I asked him, how did you do this? I wasn't there. I was like, oh, okay. But it happened. So he says, yeah, but I dealt with it by myself. So.
You had moments where you were on the bathroom floor and there was this much pain. You had moments where you took the pill they gave you and you're feeling all of this come out of you on your own at home.
Yeah.
I wonder about that always, about how safe it is to allow.
I think I'm just hard-headed. I didn't want anyone to help me. That was one. I blamed God. I was like, since you're the one who has caused this pain, you're going to be the one to take it away. I am not going to talk. That was me. Yeah, I know. And I wrote a book. I know. But I decided this was going to be my moment where he either shows up or I leave this whole godness. I was going to leave this whole story. So somehow, miraculously, he kept bringing people into my life who just opened me up, and I started telling. But the bathroom moments, everyone who was going through this has to go through it, because the questions are there. You can replay that day over and over and over. There are so many what ifs I should have, and you can't tell anyone. That's the thing. So go in your bathroom and you do this by yourself. I do not recommend it. I'm just hard-headed, but there are other people there's a couple of ladies who I am walking this journey with, and whenever they get to that bathroom moment, they call me, or I call them, or they send me a message and they're like, I'm stuck. So I'll go to their home and sit down with them. Where are the husbands?
It seems like there are a lot of women who are actually walking this journey now that you're talking about it.
They're there, but even talking about it, there's that whole stigma that comes with it. You're just like, how are they going to see me? I don't want my story out there. There's that trauma. They're just like, no, let me keep my story to myself. And the healing is in talking. This is the problem. So how do you get help when you can't open up? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, for openly sharing with us, and for also sharing your book and your story with the world. And thank you so much, Kayla, for coming to speak with us, for escorting your mother. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our show for tonight. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition with Sandra Twinogue.